Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza, and I love having these conversations each week with just creators, influencers, and frankly, people who are just shaping the future of our industry today. And we've got our focus keenly on within the tech space, just cloud native, Kubernetes, and now even expanding into talking more about agentic AI and what that means. And that's on everyone's mind as well. And that's actually the conversation today, the topic of conversation for today. We're going to be talking about just how do we take agentic AI, these AI models, the ML models that organizations build, how do we take them from uh, you know, testing from a sandbox environment to production and scale them and do it securely, do it with compliance baked in. So we're talking all about how do we actually, bring AI and ML to the real world business. So it's no longer just another futuristic idea or it's out there, but we can actually run it like we run our business apps since a long time with security, with no compromises. That's kind of the conversation today. Hope it sounds interesting. If you like what you hear, head over to our website. We've got a lot more conversations like this that we've been doing over the years now. And check out all of our other podcast conversations or other content that we put up there. You love it. With that, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Brad Micklea. His second name is spelled Micklea, in case you want to connect with him on LinkedIn. He's the co-founder and CEO at Jozu. That's Jozu. Jozu.com is the website if you want to check it out. And I'm just reading from the, the tagline on their website. It says secure and deploy ML in one click on-prem. So that's their tagline on the website. So they're all about AI and ML and just making it ready for production. And so that's what we're going to talk about, a really exciting topic. Brad, welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So Brad, as we get started, I'm curious to know about just your journey uh, up to founding Jozu, things you've been doing all through your career, and then that spark that led to starting up Jozu.
Yeah. Well, it's been a ride. I think for the last about 20 years, I have been focused on building developer tools and DevOps tools
Okay.
primarily. That's
Mhm.
kind of where my passion lies. I love enabling developers. I'm a terrible developer myself, but I love development and I love trying to help people be better developers. This is actually my second startup. The first I co-ran was a company called CodeEnvy. It was actually the first web-based IDE that could do compiled languages and that
Mm.
ran Docker containers as the
Oh,
development
okay.
environment. So we
Mhm.
were fortunate to be acquired by Red Hat in 2017.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, no, it was exciting. And I took over as VP of all things developer, developer tools, developer marketing, and developer advocacy at Red Hat for several years,
Oh,
and then
great.
moved to Amazon to run API Gateway there for
Mhm.
several years. But as much as I enjoyed my time at both those companies, I realized I'm really a startup guy. I love kind of the kind of everybody pulling on the oars in the same direction feeling that you get at a startup, all for
Mhm.
one and one for all. And
Mhm.
so when I when I left AWS, or I left AWS to start a startup, and I knew that I wanted to do something focused on helping people to build real AI applications that they could use in their organizations, whether that's a government agency, whether it's an enterprise, whether it's a hospital, what doesn't matter. Um,
Mhm.
and what I saw, this was back in what 2022, 2023, was that the data science teams I'd worked with, super, super smart people and really great at getting, new insights and models revved and things like that. but that there
Mm-hmm.
was a big gap, a big struggle between those data science projects that ran in notebooks typically, or sometimes in kind of cloud
Yeah.
environments, and then what would need to run in kind of Kubernetes or your, production infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And that was tough, I think, because, and I'm a bit guilty of this myself. I think when I started working with data scientists, I thought of them as being AI focused engineers.
Okay.
The thing I didn't totally appreciate, and I think this is changing a little bit now, but certainly back then, is that many of them had much more of a kind of research science academic background,
All right.
um,
All right.
which is different than an engineering background. Engineering is always very kind of practical focused, and academic research is not. It doesn't need to be. That's not why it's there. And
Open-ended.
so I think there was a bigger gap than I expected between understanding the constraints of
Mm-hmm.
production for these AI apps. And what
Mm-hmm.
I saw was that the huge, although there's a large number of tools out there, and they called themselves ML ops tools or end-to-end tools,
Mm.
really they were all heavily focused on development and training.
All right.
And they would have things like a deploy button, and that would be their answer to, that's the end-to-end part. That's the ops part. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
no, because you don't just have a deploy button and deploy to production in a secure environment. That's not how that works. It's more complicated than that. So that's really what we said. Well, let's make Jozu a company that focuses not on the development side so much as being the gate that takes you
Right.
from development to production and ensuring that production is really kind of a secure, a disciplined, properly operating production environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Interesting. And what was the spark? What's like your first memory of when, Jozu kind of came to life? Was it a conversation? Was it a conference talk? Was it something you read online or some thread? When was it?
No, it's actually when I was chatting with so Josie was founded by three people. I'm one of three co-founders.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's myself, Jesse Williams, who runs kind of all the front end of what we do. He was
Okay.
most recently VP of product marketing at Docker. And then Gorkam Erkan was a distinguished engineer at Red Hat who I worked with while I was there. And he's our co-founder and CTO. And
Okay.
Gorkam and I were sitting um, chatting about startups and what kind of things we should do.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, do you realize that there's no standard for how you package an application or a model, pardon me, like an AI project, I guess we should call it,
Mm-hmm.
the way there is for pretty much everything else. And
All
I
right.
said, well, that can't be true. And he's like, no, it is. Trust me. It's like you can put all your artifacts into, weights and biases, and it'll save it one way. But if you put them in Domino, it'll save them a different way. If you put them in
Mm-hmm.
Databricks, it'll save it a third way. MLflow, a fourth way. And if you want to move from one to the other, it can be days, weeks, even months sometimes
Mm-hmm.
of effort to kind of migrate all those things, or even sometimes rerun whole experiments and things like that in a new tool. So you have a backlog of results. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
but that's crazy. That can't be how it works. And he's like, no, it is. Trust me. He goes, there has
Mm-hmm.
to be some kind of standard. And both of us were just like, yeah, there has to be some industry standard. It has to be vendor neutral. It has to be something
Mm-hmm.
like a PDF or like Bluetooth that, you're
Mm-hmm.
not locked into one vendor. You can
Right.
move from vendor to vendor because especially early in a market, things change. Vendors
Mm-hmm.
appear, vendors disappear, they get bought, they get sold. And so you have to have as a user that flexibility that says, well, I can adapt to those changes as they happen. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
really what triggered our move to create the KitOps project. And so that's now, I imagine most of your listeners will know the CNCF, but the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is the governing body for Kubernetes and Istio and Prometheus and Grafana, and all sorts of projects. Well, it took on governance of KitOps after we kind of grew it.
Yes.
It's had now nearly 200,000 downloads in about 18
Wow.
months, which is far exceeds our expectations. Really
Mhm.
exciting. Um, and that really takes everything and kind of packages it into that independent and kind of standard. And it's based on OCI, which again, some of your listeners will probably know OCI as the standard
Open
underneath Docker
interface.
containers. Yeah.
Mhm,
And so we use that same OCI standard and we said, like, we don't want to be like an XKCD cartoon. We're not going to create a new standard to be the standard. We're going to use an existing standard, but adapt
mhm,
it to AIML.
mhm, mhm,
And that in turn led to the creation of a kind of working group to build out the model pack specification. So also within CNCF, there's a model pack specification. We
mhm,
led that along with Red Hat, Ant Group, PayPal, ByteDance, a number of other organizations. And so that's kind of like the OCI specification. You have this model pack
mhm.
specification, and then KitOps is kind of the largest reference implementation for that.
Really interesting journey there. You know, so you kind of, I think you probably got the idea started when, ChatGPT was just about launching or just launched. And, so that was probably before this whole AI trend kind of took off. Um, have you noticed any changes since then with all of the AI models, becoming popular, agentic AI coming into mainstream conversation? Have you noticed any changes from the time that you had started and you identified those challenges and today? Have they evolved in any way? Have they changed in any way? What changes have you noticed over the past couple of years?
Well, a lot. I mean, first of all, I think when we kind of started, most of the kind of non-technical people I spoke to had a vague idea of what AI it was, but most of them had not really used it. There was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of fear of this is going to be the Terminator. We're all gonna
Mm-hmm.
we're all gonna or we're gonna
Yeah.
get plugged into the Matrix. This is where we all die. I think a lot of that has declined. I think people have begun to realize that no, this is not strictly just the end of days. That this is a powerful technology, like any powerful technology, that needs certain controls, and you have to be careful with it. But it
Yeah.
is not evil. So that's one big kind of more macro change. The other
Mm-hmm.
big difference, of course, is just that when we started, we were early. Um, Most companies were not even thinking yet about production AI. They were just
Mm-hmm.
trying to get their arms around what the heck could we do with it? And can we do anything valuable? We don't even know. Like it sounds cool, but I don't know. Never thought about it
Mm-hmm.
before.
Yeah.
And if any of your listeners are as old as I am, you might remember kind of the early days of the internet when you would talk to companies and they'd be like, it started off first going like, oh, yeah, I've heard of the internet, but I don't think it has anything to do with me. I'm selling this, I'm selling that. What has it
Right.
got to me? I'm selling furniture. I don't need an internet. Um,
Yeah.
and then it kind of flipped. And then everyone was like, I need a website. I need to e-commerce. Oh my God, my hair's on fire. We got to go and do that now. And I feel like we've had that flip now where everyone has gone
Okay.
from, I don't think I need AI to, oh my God, I need AI. I need it today. I needed it yesterday. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's in some ways that's good for us, obviously, as a
Right.
business. We have a lot more people who are now starting to consciously think about, okay, we've done a bunch of experiments, we've done a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
prototypes, we've proven that there can be value in some of these things, but these are experiments. They're prototypes. Now we need to get serious and we need to figure out how do we turn this into a repeatable product that we can bring
Right.
into production for our customers that will have consistent value that we can, stand behind.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what when they go like, yeah, we need AI, we need it yesterday, and then they start to actually deploy these models in their organization, they start to actually put it in production. What's the first challenges? What's the first thing that breaks, or what's the first signs that okay, this something is not going as planned? We need to do this differently. What are some of those first alarm bells?
Yeah, I think that it tends to be around the operational side.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the teams that build the models, or I mean, actually, to be honest, in most organizations, the majority of models aren't being built; they're being kind of tuned, or they're using, RAG. But as those models are being developed, I think the data scientists are very on top of kind of how they're evolving, if you will. I think what starts to scare people is as it gets closer to production and these things get deployed into larger cloud-based environments, typically still pre-production, but nevertheless larger with more people playing with them. then things start to blow up. Maybe the model tips over, or maybe somebody starts finding that it's really easy to jailbreak it, and make it do things you don't want it to do. And it turns out that, well, that's because nobody's really been thinking about that. They've just been thinking about, how do I get the model developed? How do I get it fast? How do I get its answers to my test questions to be very accurate? And they haven't been trying to break it. They haven't been trying to, make it adversarial, for example. And so I think those are the first hints where people go like, "Ooh, hold on. There's more to this than just, is it accurate? Does it work? We've got to make sure, is it safe? Is it secure? Um, if it crashes, can we restart it? What do we have to restart? There's a KV cache. Oh my gosh, do we need to refill the KV cache? Do we clear the KV cache? Do we leave it alone? There's all these questions about the infrastructure around the model that people realize, oh man, we haven't really thought this through. We don't have kind of a run book.
Mhm. So, yeah, so it seems like, there's a lot of challenges around operations with self-hosting AI and ML. What would you say are some of the other key challenges that organizations face, specifically around things like security and compliance, testing, and these other priorities as well? What are some of the challenges there?
Yeah, well, that's very specific to the organization. And so certainly in regulated industries, I think, they're moving fairly slowly with AI because, they know that there are all these compliance regulations. And it's
Mm-hmm.
tough right now because, the compliance or the regulations in general with AI are very early and they're still shifting. Um, you know, so we're seeing new regulations coming out, kind of every few months for different industries related to AI. And so that creates a bit of
Mm-hmm.
a moving target. But, I think when it comes to security, one of the challenges that makes AI different from a traditional app is that you have a lot more and different attack vectors. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just, you know, is there a bug, or, have you done penetration testing? Um, it's not even, do you have a safe supply chain? Although that's a big one, and one that most organizations don't have a safe supply chain. Um, but it goes beyond that because there's questions of, well, what about prompt injection? What about bias? What about fairness? How about red teaming? Has the data been poisoned? Could it be poisoned? So there's things that touch data, that touch prompts, that touch the model, that
Mm-hmm.
touch the supply chain, that again touch, like you mentioned, kind of regulation and compliance. Can you prove, that this model from a year ago
Mm-hmm.
was not trained on PII data? Forget your most recent model. We've got a complaint now about this older one. Go show me that. That requires a level of discipline in kind of cataloging and storing these these results that
Mm-hmm.
most organizations never had to have for their web applications or their web services. So it creates a very different pressure and a very different set of processes and tools that are needed to handle that.
Yeah, a lot of complexities, a lot of moving pieces, and things keep changing. And it's kind of like, SBOM and just the challenges with that, creating and
That's right.
maintaining them. So, we kind of sketched out the background and just the challenges around bringing AI to production and operationalizing them. If you could give us now kind of segueing into the solution and just Jozu's approach. If you could give us the elevator pitch to, what is Jozu? How does Jozu fit into this entire puzzle? That'll be a great next step.
Yeah. Before I jump into that, I think the one piece of the puzzle that also needs to be connected here is kind of the organizational part. So
Okay.
one of the challenges I think that we're seeing is that it is tempting for companies or organizations to say, hey, data scientists, you're a unique group. You're a new group for us. So you're going to be in your own group here over here. And then our engineers are going to be over here, and our IT operations people are going to be over there. And
Silo.
so if you're not careful, that ends up in the classic throw it over the wall and point fingers kind
Yeah.
of interaction pattern. And that doesn't work.
Mhm.
So data scientists are saying, okay, Engineers, here's the model. You figure out how to package it and get it
Mm-hmm.
out there. And operations, you figure out what happens when it blows up. That's your problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you let that happen, you're never going to be successful. What we've seen fairly consistently is that the most successful organizations take a kind of more blended approach from the beginning. And
Okay.
of course, to me, and probably to many of your listeners, this will sound fairly logical because it's kind of a DevOps style approach of saying
Right.
we're going to have a cross-functional team, we're going to have data scientists with engineers, with kind of SREs or operators, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
work together throughout the development so that right from the beginning, there's somebody there who can go, oh, okay, it's cool that you updated, PyTorch to the latest version to make the model faster. That's awesome. But do we know about what the vulnerabilities look like for this latest version of PyTorch? Do we have any of that? Because we can't push it into production if we haven't
Mm-hmm.
tested all that stuff yet. And that's a great conversation to have early in the development cycle, and a terrible conversation to have 2 days before it's supposed to go live.
Mm-hmm.
So I think shifting all that stuff left, which is something we've talked a lot about in the last, 10, 15 years in software development, I think bringing that discipline and that approach is important. And that's really a big part of what Jozu is about. We really
Mm-hmm.
started because we've come from that world saying, look, we've learned so much. We've been so successful. Let's bring those same tools, those same processes and learnings to AI ML. So
Mm-hmm.
Jozu kind of has a number of different faces, if you will, as it kind of moves through. So typically organizations, they need to have a private, curated catalog of models that teams can start with. We've
Okay.
all seen the reports. They kind of come out periodically of, X model on Hugging Face has been proved to have a backdoor or it's a malicious code in it. And so
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows you can't trust every model on Hugging Face. It's a public marketplace. Of course you can't. So they need a private marketplace, if you will, that they can have behind their firewall where they vet everything and say, okay, you can start from any of these models. Here's your computer vision model. Here's your LLM. Here's your SLM. Here's your predictive models, whatever the case may be. So Jozu can do that. And it allows you to kind of see those, kick it off. There's a $23 billion logistics company in Europe that's kind of how they do it. They say, okay, everything is going to start from this catalog with this set of models. And of course, they're always updating what the models are. That's fine. Then the next phase, that development phase of how do you train the model? How do you do fine tuning of the model? That's something that we don't do directly. There are tons of great tools to help you do
Mm-hmm.
experiment, training, tuning of your model, data preparation, all that stuff. There are tons of tools. You should use the ones that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to milestones, that's where you should be creating what's called, a model kit. And that's that standardized package we talked about, that vendor neutral package.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the power of a model kit is really in bringing everything together. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. I think this is going to help
Good thing.
um, folks.
Yeah, I love all of the architecture diagrams and the illustrations on your website, and we went through some of them, and yeah, really, really good stuff there.
Excellent. Good. I'm glad it's helpful. Um, so let me just kind of walk folks through this. So as you can see, this is the situation kind of we're in today. Models maybe in, Jupyter Notebooks or S3. You have parameters in your experiment tracker, data sets maybe in DVC or in a data lake. You've got code in Git, docs, and a wiki. Each of these things gets its own versioning of some kind within their own repository, but they are not connected to each other. And that's problematic because these things are not loosely coupled. The model is highly dependent on the training data set. And, the code interacts with the different parameters and deployment config and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So we take all those things and we push them into this OCI artifact that we call a model kit.
All
You
right.
retain all this kind of sub artifact level versioning. So you don't lose that. You don't want to lose that.
Mm-hmm.
But you get a single package, which is versioned, which is tamper proof, which is secured, that then you can move further along throughout the life cycle. If you're in a
Mm-hmm.
regulated industry, you can hold on to each one of these versioned model kits for as long as you need. So you've got that back catalog of, okay, the auditor came and said they need to see the model from 3 years ago. What data was it trained on? You don't have to wonder if an intern went and deleted the data because they were trying to free up disk space somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's codified inside that package for you anytime. So that's kind of the core of it. You build these model kits as you hit these milestones, and that gets you something which you can kind of always refer back to, which is always secure as you move towards production. Now let's take a look at what that process looks like. So let's start with without Jozu. You do a bunch of data extraction and validation. You might create a model kit now with your validated data. Then you
Mm-hmm.
prepare the data for a very specific project need. Maybe you create another model kit with now that prepared data. Then you grab your model and you do a little bit of fine tuning on it. Now you create a model kit that is the fine tuned model plus the kind of prepared data. Then you would
Mm-hmm.
go into an evaluation. You do multiple experiment runs. You could put every experiment run into a model kit. In most cases, what people do is they'll kind of do um, materially better versions. They'll create a new model kit, kind of like a snapshot of like, okay, this is pretty good. I'm going to try something weird now. I got to have my come back 2 point.
Right.
You validate it, then you create your inference container that gets added to the model kit. You do verification, and then finally you go and deploy that to production. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
steps. What Jozu does, as you can see, we kind of focus on the right-hand side of this, and we
Okay.
essentially automate the evaluation of the model. We run six different, I forget if it's 5 or 6 different scanners, 6 different scanners, I guess, against every model that comes into Jozu.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that covers problems with the data, with the prompts, with the model, with the code. So we validate that. We
Mm-hmm.
actually have inference containers which are optimized for Kubernetes, especially, and can speed the deployment of a model to Kubernetes by 7 to 10%. Sorry, 7 to 10 times, not percent. So massively faster. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we have policy-based deployment. So you can actually say things like, if the model didn't pass X security scans, then it can't be deployed. Or if it passes security scans, but it has a license, maybe it uses a GPL license, and maybe my organization says no GPL licenses. It'll
Mm-hmm.
get blocked because that's the wrong license type. Or
Mm-hmm.
perhaps there's a manual approval that's needed. Did Twain approve this? Nope, Twain didn't approve it. All right, it's not going into production. So we have all these blocks and controls that we can put in place.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a secure deployment, you get a policy adhering deployment, you get licenses that are good, and a faster deployment out to production. All that stuff is kind of it's all that the operational rigor and discipline
Mm-hmm.
that you need when going to production. That's the part that Jozu kind of adds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking at kind of Jozu itself, you can kind of see where this all kind of comes together. So
Mm-hmm.
in this case, we've got 3 what we call model kit tags. They're kind of like a container tag or version that are in production. I can see those down here. And you can see like they're live or they're stopped, how long they've been around. We've got security scans. There's 2 critical, 3 high, a medium, and a low. Um, we've got licenses that we can track. There's 1 acceptable license. I can see the model kits that I've recently accessed, as well as recent updates to model kits down here. So kind of a general overall view.
Mm-hmm.
For each of those model kits, if I dig into a specific tag, Um, I can do things like deploy it. You can see I can deploy it to Docker with just 1 line. That's handy if I'm kind of in my development mode and I want to say, hey, Twain, can you take a quick look at the model? I can just send you this command. I can copy it and you'll just get it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I could do it with Llama CPP. VLLM doesn't really make sense, of course, if I'm doing it locally as much. I can get the deployment to Kubernetes. Obviously, this is not the whole deployment YAML. This is just the piece of the deployment YAML that your DevOps team might not know. And then they can add it to the rest of the deployment YAML, which they, of course, have built out and is very kind of custom. In this case, I guess if I was going to Kubernetes, I'd use VLLM probably. We do security scanning, as I talked about. We can do diffs between models, so you can see at a glance kind of what has changed. We capture the SHA digest of everything, so you can kind of know for sure what's different. If I look at the package itself, you can see I've got details on, oh, hold on, I'm in the wrong repo. Let's look at, I think it's this one. This one? Yes. Okay, so we've got our model, and we've got a bunch of, for example, MLflow data. So in this case, we trained this model with MLflow. I can get the run info, so I can always go back to the exact run ID. I've got the metrics. I can see exactly what the various metric scores were, precision, accuracy, etc. So I might block this model from deployment because it's only seeing a 65% accuracy and 65, actually both, precision. Got my hyperparameters. I can see the data set is here. So if I want to see what the training data set look like, I've got my Jupyter notebook here, my Python requirements, MLflow run experiment, and then a bunch of licenses, for example. So everything in one place. So this answers one of those really critical questions because one thing that, again, probably a lot of your audience will have experienced, I know I experienced at AWS especially, is eventually everything breaks. Doesn't matter what it is, it'll break at some point.
Yeah.
And the question is really how quickly can you figure out what broke and why? And one of the challenges that people often have in production today is that they'll know what the pod is in Kubernetes, for example, that's running their model. Which version of the model is that? That's less easy. Which experiment run and therefore which data set was used for that model? That's tough. Which embedding code or hyperparameters were used? Oh man, I better try and find that config file, which is one of so many config files. So by pulling this all together, it just makes it incredibly simple and incredibly fast to go through and say, okay, here's the SHA of the model in production. That matches the SHA of the model kit in Jozu. And once I have the SHA of the model kit in Jozu, I have every piece of the puzzle in one place. And now I can find everything.
And it really also kind of reminds me of what you said earlier, which is it brings these different functions together on the same platform to speak the same language, look at the same metrics, the same data. And so improves decision making, saves time a lot that way. Any thoughts on that, and just how each of these three functions that we spoke about earlier, data scientists, developers, and ops teams, how do they look at this data? Any comments at all?
That's exactly right, Twain. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that that's really important. That was a big driver behind why we created Jozu, was to help bring these people together. One of the things I saw running API Gateway was that when you have different teams using the same metrics, not only does it mean that they have the same language, like you said, they can actually kind of communicate more efficiently and more effectively. It creates empathy. And I think that's
Right.
very, very important and underappreciated, is it means that the data scientists get some understanding of how difficult the operational world is. And the operators, the SREs, understand how important the work that the data scientists do. They stop being just kind of a gray box that you can yell at and point to, and start being, people who are working with you to make something succeed. So when you come in here, you do have a little bit for everybody. With the model, this is the world that the data scientists live in. So they can immediately see, like they could, for example, come into this, and maybe this has been marked as to go to production. A data scientist might glance at this and go, oh, hold on, you guys grabbed the wrong model somehow because these scores are way too low. This is not where we ended up in our training. We got to, 85, 90%. So something went wacky here. Hold on, timeout. Don't deploy this. And that's super powerful.
Or you can
You've
set
got,
policies for it.
yeah, exactly. That's right. And they can collaborate exactly to set that policy and say, okay, here's where the bar should be for production. We can lower it a little bit for staging, and we can lower it a little bit lower for dev, and we do that collaboratively. So now it's not, why did you create that bar? It's, we created the bar, we all agree with it. You know,
Got it.
you've got things like licenses. We actually didn't even talk about it, but compliance teams, legal teams, they are becoming involved in these AI projects because there's so much that is still trying to be figured out here. And so it can be comforting for them to go in and see, okay, so we do have a CDLA license for the data set. Isn't that good? Yes, good. We feel good about that. Oh, we've got a nice Apache license for the model. Phew, we're not doing GPL. Okay, thumbs up. There's just these things which help bring that team together. What's really cool is, and again, something that I think your audience will really appreciate, it isn't just that we hold this stuff in the UI. That's important because you need to be able to, as a human, look at it. What I think is even more important is that all of this stuff, whether it's the security scans or the ML flow stuff or those policies, they're attached as attestations to that model kit. So if I go back to that first diagram, that model kit not only has the model and the params and the data set and the code and the docs, it has the results of the security scan as an attestation. It has, Twain's human approval that this is ready to go to production as an attestation. It has the license adherence as an attestation, whatever it is that your business needs. And each of those attestations, again, as your audience might know, those are all signed and they are tamper proof. So now you can start to automate those gates and say,
Mhm.
maybe you don't need any human approval or human in the loop to deploy something to dev or deploy something to stage, but you do for production. It just makes it so much easier. And it means that if there ever is a problem, you can go back and look at those attestations knowing that they couldn't have been tampered with and
Mhm.
say, so we all agreed we would let models go to production, even if they were, kind of had one high level problem over here, which we didn't think was that important, except, oh man, we just got bit. So
Mhm.
now we're going to have to raise the bar on that one, and make it
Right.
a little bit tighter.
Yeah. 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 Talking a little bit more about Kubernetes. You kind of showed us how developers could send just a part of the YAML script to the ops team, and they can deploy it on Kubernetes. And you also mentioned earlier just KitOps and just KitOps run by CNCF. What else is there about how Jozu can help with Kubernetes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, myself and my co-founders, we've been kind of in the open source community for years and years and years. Huge
Hmm.
believers in open source. And I think open source is kind of even more important in AI than it is in kind of standard applications. And we can maybe
Hmm.
talk about that a little later. But as a result, as we were building Jozu, we were always kind of looking at, well, what could we do to help Kubeflow or to help Kserve
Hmm.
as parts of the whole Kubernetes ecosystem for AI.
Hmm.
And what we realized is, Kubeflow and Kserve do a very good job of getting models from kind of development into Kubernetes for serving.
Hmm.
But they're lacking a little bit of that scanning, that governance, the auditing trail. That was the stuff that we said, that people can do that. Of course, you can DIY it. Absolutely. But it's a lot of work.
Right.
And it's one of those things where when you're talking about compliance, when you're talking about security, the stakes are very high.
Hmm.
And to have a human error there is not a comfortable place to be. That's often where organizations say, I would rather have a vendor who I could yell at and potentially take, to court than
Hmm.
have one of my own team doing that.
Hmm.
And so we take care of the scanning, we take care of the signing, we take care of those attestations. We make sure that things are versioned, audited, governed, and deployed safely, through Kserve. So we don't replace Kubeflow. We don't replace Kserve. We're not trying to
Hmm.
be better than Kubernetes. We're taking those projects and kind of lifting them up, tightening them up, making them more operationally sound so that companies can continue to use them, but with an even greater degree of trust,
Hmm.
comfort, and kind of effectiveness.
All right. All right. Awesome. So we're winding down our conversation. I want to ask you about just what are some of the exciting kind of pilot projects that you see with some of your customers who are, they've been building AI models for a while. They're excited about AI agents, and they want to, really introduce it in their organizations at scale. And so they're getting started. They're early in their journey. Where do they start? What are some of the exciting things you're seeing with those kind of organizations?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so early in this market that literally everything is exciting, I think, Twain. I think
Yeah.
that's the kind of cool part is that everybody's kind of learning, breaking new ground, getting these moments of kind of success, excitement, and celebration along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mentioned earlier the huge logistics company in Germany that kind of starts with that model catalog. I think it's very smart the way they're doing it. So that company has grown by acquisition. They have, I'm not sure how many different divisions and now, but they have over 90 global offices. And so they have a very real challenge. In some areas of their business, they use almost exclusively computer vision models. Others are using LLMs. Others are using predictive ML, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, et cetera. And very smartly, they said, look, we're not going to try and mandate what tools every single one of those teams are using because each of those types of projects needs a different type of tool set. But we do need some consistency. They deploy to AWS, they deploy to Azure, they deploy to Google, and they deploy to the edge, kind of on-prem, if you will, because they're doing logistics. And so sometimes the devices need to live kind of in a warehouse or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, well, Kubernetes is kind of the great leveler. That will be the platform we deploy to because that will work in any of the clouds. It'll work on-prem, it'll work at the edge. So they really said, okay, we got to have kind of this model kit approach at the very start. Teams can do whatever they want in the middle, but then before anything goes to staging and ultimately to production, we have to have that model kit again to tighten everything up and get some consistency across the whole globe. That way they can say everybody is going to run X certain scans. Everybody's attestations are going to kind of look the same. Everybody's going to operate to the same bar. So you don't have things like that. Another great example, there's a huge national laboratory, a research lab in the States. Um, they have been doing models for probably decades. But of course, the number of projects they have using AI now has really expanded.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them, the scrutiny has also increased. And so for
Mm-hmm.
the same reason, they're kind of saying, okay, well, we need to get kind of control over this. In a lot of cases, for them, because they're a research lab, it's about holding on to the kind of state of each of those versions or iterations for longer periods of time and in a way that they can pass off to other research groups or institutes and say, hey, this is the work we did up to here. Why don't you take that and continue on in a different direction? We're going to go in this direction because it's a very collaborative space, obviously. They also do some research for some of the defense agencies in the US. So they have extremely strict security requirements there that we help them out with.
Mm-hmm.
Last maybe example of kind of another different kind of environment is a medical tech company. They're building kind of a piece of hardware that can analyze the petri dishes lightning fast, so that as people are doing experiments, they can run these petri dishes through this machine and get super detailed, super accurate analysis of what's going on without requiring a human in the loop for that part. Um, they need, of course, to have these machines certified with EU MDR. If it was, for the states, they're going to have to go get FDA approval. And so they need to have a huge amount, again, of data that is about how they've done the experiments, not just the results. They need to be able to go back and prove, that they had responsible testing procedures and all that kind of stuff. Again, that's where these types of a solution like Jozu's is proving super valuable. So it really
Mm-hmm.
runs the gamut from startups to regulated industry to enterprise to governments. Yeah.
A nice range of examples there from, standardizing processes to making sure security and compliance is happening in the way that needs to, and even just, with really low latency performance requirements as well. So quite a
Exactly.
range of examples. They're really interesting stuff. Last question for you, Brad, before we close is, As you look ahead to the next 6 months to a year, we can't really look beyond that, with things changing so fast. But what have you got your eyes set on? What interests you the most as you like read Reddit threads and news articles? What topics are really catching your attention in the space, especially of just AI, agentic AI, and bringing it to production? What do you think is next?
Yeah, I mean, well, I love this area because I'm just a curious person and I find almost everything really interesting.
Hmm.
But I think that the one that is most compelling to me is that agentic AI. I think we're at a really interesting inflection point where the effort to create agentic AI processes, workflows, application services, whatever you want to call them,
Hmm.
is dropping pretty significantly. It's getting kind of
Okay.
easier and easier to build those. But the rigor that or certainty maybe is the better word. The certainty that people want out of these systems is kind of starting to rise as the
Mm.
quality of especially generative AI kind of starts to rise. And so that creates a real tension of a proliferation of agents with concerns about how accurate, how reliable, how safe they are. I was speaking to head of DevOps at a very large US bank, and he was expressing some frustration because he said, with MCP servers and agents, developers are just creating them and they're just sticking them out there and saying, hey, why
Mm.
don't you guys try this? And he goes, it's very hard for me in my job to go like, wait, stop. You haven't tested that. You don't know how that works. Don't just go use something that some other developer you've never met said works because they said it works. Like maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's going to do something bad. Maybe it works for them because they have a very specific use case and it will not work for you. It may actually do damage for you because it's never been tested with that use case. And that's a very real challenge. It's
Mm.
that's difficult. And so, you know, as someone who has always felt like the world benefits when there's a lightweight process, you don't want to
Hmm.
go process heavy and just start creating red tape for the sake of red tape. But often a lightweight kind of developer driven process can help keep everybody safe and make things
Right.
actually more efficient. So I'm really
Mm.
excited about to see how that shifts in the coming years, where it's not that we're now plugged into just OpenAI, but people are starting to use their own small language models and tuning them and being surprised to get better results out of that than they do out of ChatGPT. And how do we connect
Mm.
that with agents that actually do things? And then how do we chain those agents together to do more things? And how do
Right.
we oversee or how do we keep control of
Yeah.
that so that it remains safe, it remains effective, and it continues to do what we want?
Yeah. Because I think we can't stop it. The number of models are just gonna be exploding in the next few years. And just how customized and how many other agents they talk to is going to be exploding, and that's not going to be slowing down. So I think we need to really keep pace, or we need to really have a way to keep pace with all of this complexity that's growing. And so I think it's really a good time for Jozu to really be around, to really kind of, bring everything together in one place.
That's the
Yeah,
idea. That's what we're trying
yeah.
to do, just trying to help.
Exciting times. Wow. Yeah, with that, we come to the end of this conversation. Thanks so much, Brad, for joining us. It was quite an interesting conversation around agentic AI. You kind of hear these buzzwords a lot when you read the news headlines and all of that, but then just breaking down concepts, talking about it, how it works in the trenches, that's what really matters. That's what people really need to hear today. And that's what you brought us today. So, really grateful for that. Thanks so much for just sharing from all of your experiences.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me.
All right. And to all of our listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll join us for the next episode. And yeah, go and check out Jozu and all they're doing. As you heard, there's just, if you're thinking about agentic AI, thinking about running these models in production, and you're not confident, which I think all organizations probably are not, you should probably check out something like Jozu and what they're doing and their approach, and why if you want to bring AI into production and operationalize it, then you need something like this that will give you all of the peace of mind, security, compliance, scanning, testing, and all of that good stuff. So go check out Jozu, jozu.com, and connect with Brad on LinkedIn. And we'll see you on the next conversation. Thanks for joining us.